Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me check my volume. I hope everyone is doing okay this evening. First I want to thank everyone for their help with the show. You guys, people are always sending me stuff, either email, either through email, Twitter, or even under the videos, under the comments. I appreciate it, and I may not necessarily get back to people constantly. It just depends on kind of the topic and what the email is about. But I do appreciate the commentary, and I do appreciate what you guys send to help the show. So I found myself in somewhat of a perpetual conversation for the last few days, and I just had this conversation with my wife. She's not necessarily in the best of moods. She's having female issues, and that's not me being sexist. That's just reality. And so the conversation didn't necessarily last all that long, but I think it was an interesting conversation. So I have a channel, so let's talk about it. My basic argument that I think even she would agree with is that selective justice is not justice. It's something else. Now, what I mean by that is we have this odd political space where looking at something that takes place. Let me give an analogy. Say, for example, you had a cop. And I used this analogy yesterday because I think the analogy works and I like it. And it allows me to introduce other ideas. You had a cop. That cop made the determination that for whatever reason he loved blondes. He thought blondes were absolutely the best thing on the planet. And he allowed himself to be sweet talked by one blonde after the next, and never gave a blonde a speeding ticket, but will give a speeding ticket to each and every other person that goes down that road. Now you would say, is that fair? No, that's not fair at all. He's giving somebody a break. He's letting somebody get a pass based on something that supersedes or undermines essentially the law that was written in this case. Assume it was race. Let's say it was for blacks. Let's say for whites. He can let whites off, but he lets blacks go. I'm trying to make this point that the very act of, in the immediate, you can say, well, look, that person, that African-American, that blonde, hey, that guy, what if he had a thing for guys? That guy, in that moment, was breaking the law. He was speeding. And so, yeah, he should have gotten a speeding ticket. That has nothing to do with letting the blonde off 3 minutes prior. The 3 minutes prior was in the past, and, you know, are they going to let the next blonde off? Yes. Then that means it's somewhat of a systemic issue. That it's not an individual standpoint where something happens once. It's one of those things where something happens continually. So you can't necessarily look at the specific issue. You have to look at it over a larger context and say, that's not fair. That's not justice. That's something else. Apply this to the standpoint of international politics, where you have a situation of the United States looks at at Syria and Russia and say, look at what you guys are doing. You're destroying Syria. You've murdered all of these Syrians in your effort to take back the city from terrorists. The terrorists that we've been helping. You're murdering the civilian population. Oh God, and we shake our fists. Missing the point that like a week or two prior, we had just destroyed a building where we killed 100 and some people, 100 and some civilians. I think it was Mosul. Yes, you can make the argument that, hey, the fact that we destroyed Mosul and killed 100 and something civilians a week or two prior in no way stops us from condemning the people who are doing it right now at this very moment. Hey, if we kill and murder a bunch of people in another few weeks, are we going to bring it up? No. But we will make a big deal out of it if the other person does it again. At that point, we're not looking at a specific issue now. We're looking again at a systemic issue where one side tends to essentially be very selective with the justice system. The Rex Tillerson memo gets this across. We pay no mind to what our allies do, meaning from the standpoint of the abuses. So Saudi Arabia can chop off heads, arms, and they can do all the crucifixions we want. They can be a theocratic state. Israel can have an open-air ghetto, but we will not say anything about it. We will protect them as they steal land and break international law, but we will browbeat Iran. We would use economic sanctions against Iran. We would attack Venezuela and Nicaragua. We would use our economic dominance in order to try to inflict our will on the various nations around the world. I'm trying to get to this point of trying to get across to people that when you do that, all notions of trust break down. It's not law at that point. If you're in a situation where one candidate, Hillary Clinton, for example, can monetize the State Department, and in monetizing the State Department, it comes out in WikiLeaks where you can see it. If you look at it and go through it, you're like, oh my God, this looks massively illegal. Gets a pass. But they go through Donald Trump's issues with a fine-tooth comb. This is not pity the Trumper or something to that effect. I'm just trying to make the point that from an outside observer looking at this looks magnificently unfair. It looks like the legal system, if such a thing exists, is being used in one case against one, while at the same token being given a pass on the other. You can understand that people who are looking at this, who may be supporting one of the candidates, let's say, or one of the president in this case, says, wait a minute, this looks magnificently unfair. Let's take another example. Democrats. Trump gets elected. The world goes hysterical. Whistleblowers start to leak information, and Donald Trump goes after the whistleblowers. Tepidly, mind you, but goes after the whistleblowers. Democrats, we must protect the whistleblowers. Donald Trump is going after the whistleblowers. We knew it. We told you he was going to be an authoritarian, and look at me putting the boot of the government on the throat of the whistleblower. Now, Obama used the whistleblower, went after whistleblowers using the Espionage Act more than any other president in history in spades. And at no point the Democrats have an issue with him cracking down on using the boot of the government on the throat of the noble whistleblower. This is extremely hypocritical. You look at this and you lose all faith in the edifice itself, be it media or be it the political system. People are not crazy for looking at this and questioning this, thinking that all of these people are crooks, all of these people are hacks. And fact is, hypocrisy is not a minor occurrence or not a minor crime. I'm just trying to make this very specific point that looking at the political edifice, you can't look at these things as just one incident, because I guarantee you that the people who are onlooking is going to look at some level of comparison to look for justice. They're going to look for fairness. And if that is not part of the process, you're going to lose people either engaging the process or giving legitimacy to the process. An African American kills someone in the South. I don't know who it is, some random person. A lynch mob kills him. Okay, under the South, Southern justice. They'll say it, that's what they would say, Southern justice. White guy or mob kills an African American. They let him off. Now, let's say this took place in the 60s. This will take place over and over again. Certainly, we can't look at this situation and say that's fair. Now, you can say that that African American shouldn't have killed that particular person, and you would be absolutely right. And you can say that there needs to be some kind of penalty for the killing of whoever, and you would be absolutely right. But the problem with this is, if over and over again and repeatedly, you also are in a situation where if an African American gets killed, it gets a walk. Certainly, that's not fair. And certainly, you can't say that's any notion of justice where one side gets penalized while the other side always gets a walk. What about cops? Cop murders somebody, the cop walks. That cop that murdered that 13-year-old when he jumps out of the car and shoots him within a few seconds gets off. That kid had a toy gun or something to that effect, but the cop was too incompetent to figure out, or too incompetent or too cowardly to do his goddamn job right. And that kid, perfectly legal, meaning in regards to what he was doing, did not go home that night. The cop walked. If the same thing had occurred in another situation where the roles were reversed, where there would have been a kid shooting somebody, that kid would have went to prison. This is not fair. This is the kind of point I'm trying to get at. When I'm making this argument of unequal justice is not justice, I'm trying to get this point across in a larger contextual scheme that your society would always remain divided if there is no fairness in that society. That's the basic point. Yes, I understand that in any particular specific frame of reference where you can say this guy did something, so this guy should be prosecuted. But the whole premise of law, like the whole philosophical premise of law, is this idea that people under it, to some degree, are equal and will be treated as such. Not one rule for Hillary Clinton and a different rule for Donald Trump. Or for that matter, one rule for Bob and a different rule for Ted. Selective justice is not justice. That's my point. Sir Bike's the light of day. Or is it comma? Not defending it, by the way. Not defending what? All right. Oh, you said, or is it comma? I think you're talking about the killing. This is the best part where we describe how noticeably absent Bernie Sanders has been in defending whistleblowers. Eric Garner. No, it wasn't Eric Garner. This was Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice was the one that was shot when he jumped out of the car and immediately shot the kid within a few seconds. The reason why this came up was because we were having this conversation about Trump. And going from the conversation of Trump, Russia, meaning the hysteria that's taking place today. And you can look at this in two ways, whether you want to talk about the prosecution of Trump. But I want to get it more specific from the standpoint of the hysterics surrounding Russia. We do this constantly, meaning the attacks. If you look at, we have a cyber crime unit. We have a cyber attacking unit. Do you honestly believe that the CIA and the NSA are just sitting there passively, not doing anything? I have a document up here now that I'm going to go through in one of my other videos where WikiLeaks release showing how we attacked France. CIA espionage orders for the last French presidential election, essentially getting assets and getting information, hacking into France. Hacking into France. And I know that sounds weird. Hacking into France is not the right terminology for it, but essentially, based on the terminology of the language that we've been using with Trump and Russia, attacking France, if the language is going to be consistent. But it's not just France. I'm trying to make this point that it is massively hypocritical. And it is hard to even take the argument seriously that spearfishing for John Podesta is the equivalent to an attack on America. That is some of the dumbest arguments. And it's somewhat of a preposterous mechanism for anger when you look at what we do ourselves. Now, if you look at this in one specific individual context, you may say, well, dude, you have to, you gotta, this is a big deal and everything else. And the stuff that you're talking about with the cyber warfare where we're attacking other stuff took place like a few minutes ago. So that took place in the past. Of course, that's nonsense. We engage in certain behaviors of the world. Other countries behave in certain behaviors of the world. All of this hysteria is for political effect. It needs to be acknowledged and understood as such. I find it absurd. But the only problem with this is, from a cause standpoint, that will have major repercussions from the standpoint of policy going forward. And not just that, not just a major repercussions from the standpoint of policy going forward. There are going to be certain behaviors that are going to be compelled of politicians based on the zeitgeist that's being perpetrated in the media and in some of the populace. If Kamala Harris won the presidential election in 2020, she wouldn't get my vote, but let's say she won. What would be her stance from the standpoint of Russia? What would be the pivot point from the standpoint of the United States with the conspiracy theory being propagated that Russia somehow attacked democracy? Like, there will be consequences for what is being driven into the societal consciousness right now for political effect. The rest of the world finds this to be ridiculous. A lot of the population finds this to be ridiculous. Selective justice is not justice, it's something else. So, it's also terribly hypocritical. Yeah. We attack democracy on daily. Yes, we do. This is kind of my point. It's like, I mean, I try to apply it to local scenarios when I'm using the thing as a cop and everything else, because people make this argument of, yeah, dude, but when something happens in a moment, don't you have to deal with it? And it's like, but the problem with that is if you're talking about a country of laws and you're saying that people are equal under the law, but the law applies differently to some than others, well, I'm looking at this one specific point and you're saying we must enact a law here, but all of these other situations, the law for the most part didn't apply. What is the person who's getting hit with the law going to think? You're hitting me for something that you didn't hit the other person on. That doesn't seem fair to me. That doesn't seem just, because it's not. It's only justice if it's fair. So, all right. Jamal, they indicted 12 Russians. If you keep doubting that, you're a Putin puppet or slow. That's what they say, Rob. That's what they told me. All right, I'm going to end this here. I have a few more that I want to do, but we need more show trials. Garnome, I know, right? We need more show trials. All right, I'm going to end this. I have others that I want to do, but I have a series of ones that I want to do, so I'm going to push those up. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys. And where's